If you drive a truck, does that mean you love country music? Do all EDM listeners do hard drugs? Are classical music fans pretentious? The genres are how we categorize different music, and this can be done based on the instruments involved. Say we have an electric guitar, electric bass, drum set that can lend itself to a very different style of music than a bunch of acoustic instruments, maybe a mandolin, a banjo, and a fiddle. And also the voice as an instrument can vary very widely depending on the person, on their vocal style, and kind of the natural sound that they tend to have. Might work better in certain genres than others. So also the compositional techniques used. If a song has a lot of kind of experimental chords and weird time signatures, that could be categorized into a very different style of music than, say, just a basic 3-chord loop. We can group music based on the time period in which the music was written. So say if you know 90s music or 80s music or 70s music, they all have kind of their own distinct character. And there's still different genres within each of these time periods, but we can even zoom out further into 1800s music or 1700s music. And that brings us to classical music. So what is classical music? So what's commonly referred to as classical music is Western European music that originated in the 1700s, maybe a little earlier, but a lot of the traditions and musical writing styles that originated around that time and continued into the 1800s, 1900s, and now. So what most classical musicians refer to as classical music is actually the classical period, which is generally in the 1700s of this Western European music. But we'll be referring to classical as just all centuries in the classical style stemming from that period. Joshua Bell is a famous classical violinist who did an experiment where he played in a busy subway station and only 7 out of 1,000 people stopped to listen. So he had just played the same music in a concert hall 2 days earlier for a sold-out crowd. And so this is interesting for a couple reasons. The music was the same, the guy was the same, he was playing on the same multi-million-dollar instrument, and only the setting was different. So this begs the question, do concert goers even know what it is that they're listening to, or are they just looking for some kind of perceived experience? If he's playing in a concert hall, he must be really good, right? The reality is sometimes yes, sometimes no. I think it's not all about the name. That's one of the beauties about live music. You never know exactly what you're going to get. So the music that he played was written by Bach, who during Bach's lifetime, he mostly wrote and played music for his church. And so he was never rich or famous during his lifetime at all. It wasn't until after he died that music scholars found his music and decided that it was super high quality writing, and that's how we know about it today. So there's nothing pretentious about the music in itself, especially given Bach's life in history. That said, there are definitely some certain cultural associations with classical music, given that in the 17 and 1800s, most of it was funded by aristocrats. Also, since there were no recordings, only the upper class could really afford to go to the concert halls with the orchestras, and there's no other way for the common folk to hear it. Thankfully, that's not the case today, since most major cities that have an orchestra have things like student discounts and recordings available online. Universities that have music schools very often have free faculty concerts. So if you live near a college, you can probably go see a really high caliber classical concert for free. I get the impression that many people think of piano as somewhere between going to finishing school and learning advanced calculus, some sort of mystery of elegance and technical achievement, which is true to some extent, but I think there's more to it than that. I think of the piano sound, or timbre, as the most neutral tone of any instrument. But maybe that's just because I'm a pianist. So if you play another instrument and you think of that as the neutral sound for pitches, be sure to leave that as a comment. So assuming piano is the neutral sound, we can think of it as sort of a pencil sketch version of a drawing. So because you can play so many notes with all your fingers, each of the lines can be separated out into different instruments, making it an orchestra arrangement or a rock band arrangement, because each note has sort of a different function going on. And each of these other instruments has its own color to it, which we can think of as kind of adding color to this pencil sketch. In the same way, we can take the color out of a fully fleshed out orchestra or rock band arrangement and then put it into what we call a piano reduction. And in this piano reduction, we're focusing on the key components of musical structure and harmony. In this way, we can think of the piano as kind of like a budget orchestra. As a pianist and piano teacher, I've never thought of my own experience with the piano as being particularly pretentious. The instrument I grew up learning on was an old spinet, sort of a compact version of a piano, that was being given away. That being said, even an upright piano, when new, can be pretty expensive, starting in the several $1,000s and up range. So as technology has gotten better, keyboards have become more affordable. But if you're looking for one for the purpose of playing piano that has the right piano feel, it's going to need to have weighted keys, which these usually start at $400 and up. So there's some barrier to entry, if not by money, then by time it takes to learn. And I think classical music is sort of notorious for being known as really difficult to play. And this isn't always the case, but it's sort of another stereotype. Piano is difficult. There are definitely difficult pieces out there for every instrument, but I don't think impressiveness because of difficulty or perceived difficulty is really the point of classical music or of any kind of music. I would rather play or listen to music that conveys an emotion clearly and to experience that feeling fully. And this can be done through classical or any other genre music and on any instrument. When reading books in school, every story can be given a reading grade level. And when you're young, you start out reading shorter books with smaller words and simpler ideas. And as you progress, you're reading longer books, longer words, more difficult words, and more complex sentence structure. Now, the same can be said for listening to music. There's some music that's specifically designed to be easy to listen to, and this might be because it's meant for dancing or while you're doing other things. And there's other music that is just more complicated in nature, so it demands more of your attention, so it's more difficult to listen to. So if we think about the context in which classical music was made, at the time there were no recordings, so the only way to listen to it was to be sitting in the concert hall doing nothing else but listening to the music. So because the attention was sort of captive of the audience, then it could allow the music to be more complicated to make use of that full attention. I think that's still the best way to listen to music of any kind if you're really trying to let it sink in as deeply as you can. Now, part of what we're trying to do on this channel is to help you improve your music listening grade level. Now, there's no official standardized tests or anything like that. We just know that music is everywhere, whether you're listening to it in the grocery store or just talking about a song you like with friends, that you can have a more enriching experience. Genres are a way of categorizing and describing entire cultures that can't truly be put into a box. It's sort of a chicken and egg situation of, did the music come from the culture, or did the culture come from the music? There can be clothing, hairstyles, attitudes, which is what we've discussed today, and even entire lifestyles that can be associated with different genres of music. There's no question that classical music has some history with elitism that has some elements that are still present today. It was usually that the musicians were funded by those that were ultra-wealthy rather than them being ultra-wealthy themselves. And it's usually that the music itself is not pretentious unless the composer happened to have an attitude that translated into the music itself. When studying music's most basic structural elements, such as pitch and rhythm, it requires enough focus that a lot of the stylistic elements associated with genre tend to be filtered out. When you're listening to music, I would encourage you to notice if you have any gut reaction biases about the genre and try to focus on the basic elements of that particular song objectively outside of those biases. There might be parts of these cultures that feel unfamiliar or even intimidating to you, and music is a great converging point on the Venn diagram of different cultures because there's often some overlap in the pencil sketch version of particular songs. and you might find two songs in completely different genres that have the exact same chord pattern. So your challenge for today is to try stepping outside your comfort zone and listen to some music that doesn't necessarily feel like your number one jam. Talk to someone who loves that kind of music, and I'm sure they'd love to tell you all about it, if you're willing to listen. All music is made up of pitches and rhythms when boiled down. So feel free to check out other videos on this channel to learn how to make more sense of all that, to approach new music or music you already know and love in a more informed way using just your ears. And if you'd like to meet with me one-on-one, check out the link below.